There's a famous Wayne Gretzky quote that's been repeated many times throughout my content over the years. You know the one, say it with me, skate to where the puck is going, not where it has been. And I've probably repeated it more times than I should because it's one of those superb analogies that blend my love of sports and business strategy. But there's a flip side to this mantra, one that doesn't get talked about nearly enough throughout the CPG industry. And while my conversation with Carl Goyette, CEO of GURU Energy, covers just about every pocket of space that has emerged recently within the ever evolving US and Canadian energy drinks market, you'll also be able to pick up on that reverse Gretzky mantra risk. But beyond that wide ranging strategic categorical chat, Carl and I also spent time talking about the decision for Guru Energy to become a public company 4 years ago. Moreover, how those investor expectations, along with the evolving energy drinks market dynamics, have impacted the company's strategic decisions. And to keep with the hockey reference, sometimes when you find pockets of space where you can work, if you do things right, you'll become even more prepared for when that puck might come your way. And as you'll hear in this content, this is where I think Guru Energy sits right now, exercising strategic discipline and focusing on the actions that will give the energy drinks brand a way to create true long term differentiation in a crowded market. But these are just some of the interesting topics we chatted about in this episode. And then finally, for those of my community that have been harping on me that I haven't updated my Guru Energy commentary since that first public quarterly earnings report from March 2021, I hope this content more than suffices for that delay. But without further delay, here is the recent conversation I had with Carl Goyette. Carl, I appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to join me. This is definitely a long time coming. I'm excited about this conversation.
Likewise. Really was looking forward. Thanks for the invitation.
So I was thinking at the beginning, I was like, I don't know if he remembers this, but since we had a little bit of a conversation off camera, I'm like, maybe you do remember this. But when I think it was March 2021, I think you guys were doing your first like quarterly as a public company. I was obviously interested because again, this was like a period where there was a few different, I would say, smaller revenue sized CPG companies that were going public in the US and in Canada. I was like, wow, we're going to get a lot more access and information on a lot of these things. And I made a comment around that. I said, you guys felt like an energy drink brand that was giving off these like 2018, 2019 Celsius vibes. And I, through that video, I was putting some logic out there. And the logic was really that, like, I thought definitely you guys were skating where the puck was going in the sense of like the energy drinks market. Like you guys, in terms of the composition of the products, clean, natural, organic ingredient profile. I think you guys were really leaning into, product innovation. I thought that, with the advancements of, if it's flavor systems, all that kind of stuff was working in your guys' favor as long as you guys were kind of iterating the product going forward. And then I think the branding and everything didn't look like the typical like natural channel beverages, which I think again was going to work in your guys' favor. And just like Celsius, I think was riding a little bit of like what Bang Energy was doing like during those time. I think you guys had the opportunity to kind of like in a racing NASCAR way, like the draft off of some of that kind of momentum that they were building. And we'll obviously get into like a lot of what was happening since then and what's going on and your wins and things that you guys have been working on. But, and then I honestly, I don't think I made enough of an update, at least on YouTube. I think I spoke several different times on LinkedIn and things about your guys' business. And maybe I've thrown you guys into some conversations, but I have done a terrible job at updating at least my audience on what you guys are doing. So that's why I reached out, because I was like, this is a total blind spot for me that I hope that you could fill up.
Absolutely. A lot has happened since then, right? So I'm not sure where you want to start with the story, but I think the mindset is still very much there. There's a passion for cleaning up this industry. We think there is still potential for many brands to come and disrupt this industry, just like Bang did, just like Celsius did, and many of the performance energy brand came as disruptors, right? On our side, we're taking a different angle, right? We have deep, natural, better for you roots that started from 1999, 25 years ago. Right? This year we're celebrating our 25th anniversary. So we're taking a different angle, but this idea that this industry needs to change and is changing is still very much true.
Yeah, before we get into, I think, kind of the guru specifics and things, I'd love to get a little bit of your sense of maybe the evolving energy drinks market. You've been with Guru, I think, for like 10, 11 years. So, I mean, you've obviously been in the space for a while, and you've been in even, CPG and consumer goods long before that. So you're able to pay attention to consumer movements and understand the behavioral changes and their intents and all that. But I think in the energy drinks market, arguably there's been a lot of change that's happened fairly quickly. I mean, it's still a very new category in the grand scheme of things, but it's accelerated in terms of just the evolution. And I think that you'd mentioned like some of the consumer behavior stuff, or the consumer segmentation. You think about performance energy, you think about just natural organic energy, you think about just even going back further than that, like just taking these like carbonated, caffeinated sugar waters and moving them into like maybe artificial sweeteners that could be better for you, maybe not better for you. Regardless, at least pushed the calorie sugar movement a little bit in a direction in the positive way. And then obviously people have moved that into performance, functional ingredients, and there's a number of other kind of stuff going on. But like consumers, I think also have had to like adopt their mindsets on everything. Like the health and wellness mindset has really been a big shift for people. I think that just them looking to create better choices in their day-to-day life has made at least I think a pretty positive impact in society. I think that obviously we can get better and we can obviously evolve, but I think it takes consumers to start to like recognize that they have to make daily consumption changes, and then that moves the industry forward. And I think energy drinks has really benefited from that in a number of different ways.
Big time. Yeah, we're touching on a lot of things, right, that have changed. When I joined over 10 years ago, I was a real fan of the brand. I'm not the founder, right? I joined as a shareholder in 2013, 2014, and I was a big fan of the brand. I really was a strong believer in the potential of this brand back then. I'm still very much a believer in the outstanding potential for Guru. And I would say that when I joined, the industry was surprisingly stable. If you look at this, there was 2 brands dominating the space, with different brand positionings, but from an ingredients point of view, very similar, right? Sizing and pricing different, but it was very, very stable as an industry, right? And we saw the opportunity to disrupt this, like, with a better for you product. And when I joined, we had like I'll speak about the Quebec market because this was really the like where we're from, and this is where we first built our momentum, and we really became a disruptor. We were at 2% market share at that time, right? And we had huge momentum, right? We started like just with repositioning, taking a clear stance on better for you. We went from 2% market share to 15% market share. We became the number 3 player, right? We surpassed Rockstar at the time, which was a big achievement, right? To say, hey, we're number 3 brand in a lot of stores and banners, number 2 brands ahead of Monster, right? In some stores ahead of Red Bull, became number 1 brand with the 18 to 25. So there was a lot going, right? Huge momentum for, hey, there's clearly a momentum for better for you, natural, clean energy in our home province. So obviously we said it's now time to go and expand beyond the Quebec province, right? And this is where I'm sure we'll touch on the going public and the raise money, everything. But the reality, as we were doing this in Quebec, other dynamics were happening in North America, right? The first real disruptor we saw coming, as you mentioned, was Bang, which was for us a surprise, right? Because this is not where we saw the industry going. We thought the industry was going to go more from a better, cleaner, fewer ingredients, a short list of natural ingredients instead of a longer list of artificial ingredients, right? So this kind of changed a little bit our view. And then Bang created space for other brands that, if you think C4, you think Ghost, you think Celsius, which is not pure play. It's not like they came from the fitness industry and went straight, but there is this fitness dynamic that came into play. And although there's a perception of health, like if you look at the list of ingredients, not really cleaner. So different dynamics that happened, but we kept our angle. As well, we're not a performance energy. We don't come from the supplements space. We're going to stick to this. This is our brand DNA, and this is what we stand for. But surprisingly, like if we look at the market in hindsight, there has been a lot less disruption from a clean, natural energy than there has been from a performance energy, right? Which has been a surprise. Other things you touched on, right? There's clearly there is movements towards more flavors. Consumers want more innovations. They're less loyal. There's a lot of movement going through zero sugar, zero calorie. I think these are the big changes in the industry. I think there's other dynamics at play, but these are the bigger ones, I would say.
You know, when you're talking about, you know, the jumps, or, you know, I made the joke about the, you know, the caffeinated sugar carbonated waters, you know, I think in my mind, a lot of times I think about, you know, the consumer and where they are and where they're going and kind of what's that gap. And a lot of times if somebody's, you know, we'll go off category and say something like if they're drinking regular Coca-Cola and they're used to that, and then all of a sudden they're seeing everybody drinking water, plain water, and you see this big gap. A lot of times people can't go from A to Z. They have to create this kind of evolution where they're kind of, okay, I go to something that's a little bit more relatable or something that I feel is similar. And I think that's where a lot of this, you know, market is, where in the energy drink side is like the performance energy drink side is really a jump in that direction, but it's eventually, you know, does the performance energy drink turn into a performance clean energy drink, and does it like the offshoots start to like splinter out? But to your point, you know, how long it takes sometimes for those consumers to eventually go from A to Z can be a lot longer, I think, in a lot of senses. So then, you know, you skating where the puck is at, sometimes you're waiting for it. You know, you keep using a hockey term, you know, like sometimes you're like, you know, the pass wasn't
towards where the puck is going to be, right?
Yeah,
not where the puck is at.
Yeah, the pass was, you know, like you got there way before the pass got there. Like something happened and you're like, okay, do I wait here or do I go towards, you know, where it's at? And I think where you guys have maybe made some of those adjustments, and this is, again, we're probably going to weave into some of the guru stuff, but I think naturally, you know, with some of the product innovation, some of the flavor stuff that you guys have done, like, I feel like it's a little bit of, obviously you're not changing the dynamics or the core attributes of the products, of like what it holds true of the core, but you are moving a little bit closer to like where everybody else is at, because, you know, flavor is still something that people really focus on. I think flavor in itself moves people and moves the category even into larger use occasions. You know, you see a lot of people now not necessarily just thinking about it as it's a replacement for coffee in the morning. It's also a beverage that you drink during lunch, or like it's an enjoyable beverage that seems to be becoming more mainstream, mostly around taste and mostly around some of those things that, like, you know, no knock on the original Red Bull and the original Monsters and the original whatever, but like that was a taste that you had to enjoy. Like there was a certain, you know,
conventional energy drink taste.
Yeah, the conventional, like the OG energy drink, like that has a certain taste. And some people still love it.
It's still a huge portion of the industry. Let's be honest.
People still love it, but like I always think to myself, like, would I want to drink that when I'm having like a sandwich or something? Maybe not. I would enjoy having a nice, like, you know, raspberry lemonade flavored one or whatever. And I think some of that stuff pushes the category towards a larger opportunity, and it's matured the industry. And I think that's where a lot of now, you still have the two main brands. Now you have a third, you know, really great $1 billion. And then you have like what used to be, you know, a big pool of smaller, you know, $100 million brands are now like $500 million brands. And like now there's so many different layers that provides opportunities, like the fragmentation of the products. Now the I want to call them sometimes table scraps, but like, you know, like this, like as the consumers are evolving, those opportunities become bigger and bigger and bigger, and you could build substantial businesses in there. And I think that's kind of where we're at now. I think there's just a ton of opportunity out there for brands like you guys to actually be able to tell people those value propositions, be it from the marketing side or the product side, and people understand it, they get it, they love it, and they want to support it, and it creates more of a movement than when you first started with the business. It was a lot tougher, I think, to explain some of that stuff, and the problem made sense for consumers, or at least they understood why they should get behind it.
Well, you're touching on two things, right? The first one is fragmentation, disruption. And for us, we see this obviously as, again, opportunities. I view it certainly as the more consumers reconsider their energy drink consumption and their energy drink purchases, the better, right? If you have people who have been drinking the same brand for 20 years, that's much harder to disrupt than people who are changing brands and exploring the category. The category consumers were so loyal to the two same brands, right? That it was it's still very hard. Like, this is probably one of the toughest, if not the toughest CPG industry to disrupt. But this fragmentation is a good one, right? In terms of how we've adapted, right? It's funny you touch on flavors, but I'm the first one that I changed my mind on this, right? For me, for the longest time, I said flavors are not innovations. Right? Flavors is just like you can use the same formulation and just give it certain flavors. And for me, I didn't call this innovation. So they're just pure line extensions. But then you have to look at the consumer. You have to be consumer centric. And we've done a lot of research talking to consumers, both in qualitative and quantitative. And it came out loud and clear. Consumers want to explore more flavors. They want to have more choice. They don't want to stick to always the same product, like you made your comment earlier, right? If they're having a sandwich so it's something different, right? So we were embracing, like, we were a plant forward energy drink company. Right? Our innovations were done through matcha, yerba mate, guayusa, having consumers explore and discover these fantastic plants that bring functionality, which we knew was always hard to explain. It's much harder to explain what a matcha is or what yerba mate is versus what wild berry is. It's much, and we realized that, these are all the plant-based stuff is very much a reason to believe it's part of who we are, but consumers want the flavor, they want to know what they're buying. So that's a big shift that we did over time for our brand. Like, that's an example of how we've adapted to this. Right? So I wouldn't say we are purely launching flavors now. We have this mindset of, hey, let's bring functional innovation with real tangible ingredients, but let's also offer consumers more choice because that's what they want.
Yeah, and it makes me think about even the choice of even where some of these products are being, offered or merchandised or whatever. I think about, not that 2020 was the cause of some of this. I think it accelerated a lot of this, but still the energy market is still very much, centralized in the convenience world because, somebody has a need for energy, which a lot of it is stimulation and caffeine, and they go to the quickest retailer that's right around the corner, which is usually a convenience or a gas station, and they go there. But because at a time when consumer mobility was kind of down to next to nothing, consumers that still utilize those products in their daily life, they needed to go and purchase those products in different ways. If that was online, or if that was maybe in bulk at a wholesale club, or if it was just at mass retailers or whatever, you started to buy things in different products, which then also, I think, opened up the market maybe to different people. I mean, I think ultimately, yes, there's everybody shops at a convenience store or, at a gas station when they're grabbing things, but there are a lot of times where people are, I guess, discovering or interested in finding products in different ways. And now you can create, I think, a lot of opportunity, create a lot of revenue with being able to do some channels really great outside of convenience sometimes. Like, I mean, there are brands that are, again, I think for you to be the leader, the top dogs, you have to probably, excel in convenience, but there are available pockets. There are brands that are doing tens of millions of dollars on Amazon. There's tens of millions of dollars in wholesale clubs. And like, you could kind of cultivate or, create a brand in different retail spaces that wasn't available, I think, until very recently. And again, all these things are probably, the consumer behavioral changes and things that happened, and all the kind of chaos creates opportunity. And it's interesting just how fast these things, I think, have accelerated over the last couple of years.
Yeah, clearly there's a lot to say about convenience, right? Convenience is still by far the main destination for energy drinks. But if you look at disruptor, challenger brands, right, the reality is convenience stores are very much impulse. They're very much blue collar. They're very masculine, right? And they're also very fast. And so there's very little what we call shopping and browsing in convenience. People go in, go out. They're in a rush. They know what they want. Pre-planned purchase. Very little switching happening there. And so a very important channel to succeed in. And we know this channel because in Quebec, we're very successful in this channel. But when you're trying to build this brand outside of Quebec, then it really becomes, it's hard to build a brand in convenience. Right? And I think this is where we also changed a little bit our angles and say, hey, where is we're very clear on the GURU consumer, and we might talk about that, who the GURU consumer is, with whom does the brand resonate really well, right? And where are these consumers? Where are they shopping? Clearly, there's a big portion that shop in convenience, but how do we capture them initially? How do we bring them in the brand is what we're looking at. Right? And you're touching on the size of the prize, right? Or the opportunity. And, for us, obviously you can look at North America, it's $22 billion industry. We're in Canada, right? And we look at our industry in Canada and it's $600 million, right? That's the size of it. So it's underdeveloped versus the US in terms of consumption per capita and all that. But then we look at a channel like Amazon. Just Amazon in the US is the same size as Canada. And then Costco in the US is the same size as Canada. So to look at where can we gain share, we look at our momentum and where is our consumer, and we look at the momentum we have in these different channels. And we say, well, yes, convenience is going to remain important. And in Canada, we are a partner with PepsiCo. So we have 90% ACV in convenience stores. So we have to be committed to making the brand work in convenience and the velocities accelerate in convenience. But we also realize that in order to build the brand, you have to build outside. Like we kind of broke a lot of the golden rules of brand building when we partnered with PepsiCo and entered Ontario and Western, because we just went from zero distribution and zero awareness to 95% ACV, spent a lot of dollars on marketing and all that to try and accelerate, right? Which is it's a whole other discussion. But now with the experience, when you're looking back, you say, well, no regrets at all, but there's brand building needs to happen and it takes time. It takes time for consumers to discover the brand, understand the brand before it becomes a habit that they buy it every day in a convenience store.
And maybe that gets us into, I kind of started off talking about, you guys going public. I think it was November of 2020. And being within the public eye, there's an aspect of, expectations and people's ideas. And, even me saying something like, oh, you guys are, have the vibes of Celsius years before that. Though my voice doesn't mean much, and there's a lot of those people that will say these things, like it ultimately creates expectations that then for you guys have to or get influenced by in some manner, even if the I guess the better strategy is to take the long route and focus on these, brand building aspect. Like there's a quarterly expectation. There's these things that people are looking at, and then you make decisions sometimes in a manner that feels right in the time. And then, like you said, you don't change it, but you go, oh, like, I broke some golden rules. I probably should have taken the slower route. But the expectation is now as a public company sometimes is that people want to see movements and they want to see change and they like to see momentum and they like to see these things, when in reality, CPG is like you're selling these brick by brick units that take a long time. And the more that you accelerate that, the more things have the potential to break. It's not like software or something where like it's just replicated.
Exactly.
I think that there's an aspect of like the faster you go, the more chances are that you create some misalignments that cause, if that cost issues, is that efficiency issues, whatever those are. But like we get caught up sometimes in seeing maybe the outlier growth stories and not realizing that there's a lot of things that could happen along the line if you push the gas too hard.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, there's a lot to say about that, right? I think the expectations, we honestly, when we went public, we had huge momentum. So we had, and we still have those big ambitions, right? So that hasn't changed. I think the time frame of these expectations and how fast and the way to get there might have changed, but the expectations are still there internally. So I wouldn't say that has changed. Obviously, there was some big hype when we entered the public market on the TSX. There was hype that honestly was outside of our control. There's a lot of people who are outstanding fans of GURU, who love this brand and believe in the potential. And there was a lot of investors who also thought that, hey, the next big disruptor, and who also think still today that the next big disruptor for energy should be clean energy, and a brand like GURU is very well positioned to capture that. Right? But that created hype, not just from institutional investors who are more prudent, but by retail investors who were very active at the time. We're talking 2021, and it created hype, just brought the stock price up, right? Created some pressure to make sure that we would make big moves. But at the time, we had raised the cash, and we wanted to do big moves anyway. And so we placed some big bets. There was no guarantee, but they were educated big bets. For example, expanding in Ontario and West, the partnership with PepsiCo, spending a lot more on marketing. We placed those big bets, breaking some of the golden rules that we talked about. Right? But I think there was some more pressure. But I think where I want to go is, thankfully, we had this long history. Right? Like we were not a new brand. Right? We had almost like 20 years of experience. When we became public, always being profitable, always being very methodical about how we expand. Often we were actually being accused of not expanding fast enough, right? Because we were very methodical about, okay, we're not going to list there, we're not going to expand our distribution footprint too fast if we don't know if we can sustain it, and we want to remain profitable, so we're going to do these small things, right? So this long history is not lost. Right? Then there's a short era where we placed some big bets, made some big moves, but that history is kind of useful for us to go back to our roots, go back to, hey, we were always profitable. We can be profitable again, even if we're public. Here's what's fundamental. Here's what's working, right? Because by trying a lot of things, we learned what's working and what's not working for us, which we would not have learned if we would not have done it, right? So there's real value in having done some of those mistakes, right? There's real value for us. So now we have a clear plan forward on how methodical and how disciplined we are going to be, right? And how we're going to use the cash that we still have in the bank in a very, very prudent way.
Yeah, I think that's the great thing about just the combination of I started off talking about the evolving marketplace because I think as all of that, chaos, all that like change happens, in my mind as a strategist, that always is just opportunity. There's massive shifts of behavior and consumers and things that are going on that people then are open up to this discovery period of new things. And then that creates, chances for people. And during that time, with the extra, the money, the opportunity in terms of going public and all that, like, and you guys taking a lot of tests, it created a great environment to be able to understand which things, were effective, which ones maybe weren't as effective. And if they weren't, you guys could dissect, is that a timing thing? Was that something that we did? Was that something that just we misinterpret? Whatever it was, you kind of can put yourself in a better position of creating conviction for the longer term to take advantage of a lot of these things that are still changing. And then now you go back to the roots of the business, of profitability, and being able to build the business over the long haul. And I think it puts you guys in a really good position. I think that, paying attention to the last couple of quarterlies, looking at that and saying like, okay, like things are starting to make sense. So then it goes back to like, that's a blip on the radar instead of like, that is just the expectation. It's like, no, we're rerouting back to, how we've always been, but then we're a lot smarter. We're a lot better informed than we were before, because if we would have just stayed conservative forever, and you made the comment about being too conservative, I think that like, a lot of people that maybe aren't in the beverage industry don't realize like you typically don't make money for a long period of time in the beverage industry, especially, energy beverages, because like it's so competitive and you have to spend a ton of money on marketing and a lot of things that like, just because you want to try to get growth, you guys actually were taking a different route of like being conservative and methodical and whatever that is. And I think that that's still core to the business. Now it's like you are now also armed with a lot more information, a lot more insights, a lot more understanding of what you guys are and more importantly, what you aren't. And I think that that's probably set you up for now this like, much better position going forward.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Like, brand building takes time, especially in the energy drink space, where there's a lifestyle component. There's the reason why private labels never worked in energy drinks. There's huge imagery implications, self-expressive benefits. What does it mean when I'm drinking a GURU? You need a brand that people want to wear t-shirts, they want to have stickers. Like, in order to have success, it's fundamental. Like, product is not, like, we're absolutely convinced that we have the best product out there, but the best product is not enough to win. Right? You have a great product and you need these lifestyle components, and that's what makes this industry so hard. Like, building a lifestyle brand, there's a little bit of a science to it, but there's a lot of art to it, right? And the creative part and what type of message and who you're targeting. So we've done a lot of work on understanding the consumer, understanding the brand archetypes and what resonates for our consumers. And now, like, deploying back to, okay, this is a consumer, but there's always this creative piece that you always need to adapt, because that changes. So I think that's one that's, building a lifestyle brand takes time and you can't bypass too much. And if your only bet is to build a lifestyle brand in convenience stores, it's probably not going to work. Like, you need more than convenience stores. That's for sure. I think the other component, I think that would be the two key things that I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think energy drinks, it's been this, you could probably broaden this out to any of the functional beverages and whatever, but it's become a little bit of the signaler of your lifestyle. I think that especially in energy drinks, there's so many different varied lifestyle ways in which brands are presenting that, and like how, what do you resonate with? What can is in your hand says a lot about you, I think, now today, because there's so many options.
Much about who you are.
Yeah, and I think that like and that's where the opportunity and still the challenge is at. To your point, like, brand building is very difficult. A lot of times people are product sellers, not brand builders. Like the building of the actual connection with the consumer and actually building out that who are we, what we're going to stand for, both internally, externally, and how well do we communicate that, and how well can we align that long term, and are people resonating with that? That's tough to do, especially now with so much noise in the market. Like, everybody's trying to get your attention. Before you probably head into work, you already have hundreds or thousands of messages smashed at you from every brand possible, asking you to do something, look at something, tell us about something. So then it's hard for you to break through some of that stuff. And it comes down to, I think, like, being laser focused on who the customer is, what's the strategic alignment between the product, between the internal core values of the company, the external customers. Like, should that all be in a straight line, and how well can you communicate that? The ones that do it the best, have the chance of doing great things in the market. The ones that, to your point, are only focused on, functional benefits of the product or whatever that is, I think is a struggle, because energy drinks as a whole has always been, I think, a lifestyle kind of brand approach that just sells a functional product. It's not that the functional aspect is what speaks to people, because this is me coming from the sports nutrition supplement industry, is like, everybody's trying to create better mousetraps. Everybody's saying, well, we have 50 milligrams extra of this, we have this, that, whatever. And it comes down to, the reality is like, consumers are not as well educated of the nuance of different things. They tend to feel sensory stuff. They tend to, solve problems in a much more simplistic way. And because of that, energy drinks as a whole, if it's caffeine or whatever, like that's what typically people are serving or needing. And then the other stuff is what's actually like why they're connected to brands. Like it's not the extra 10 milligrams of caffeine or, wherever. Those things end up, I think, becoming support elements to the bigger strategic narrative. So like to your point around plant ingredients or whatever it is, like if you guys were to go out and use a bunch of chemical this or, synthesized in the lab, this, that, or whatever, like it doesn't necessarily align with the rest of the core attributes of the brand. It has nothing to do with just, the composition of the products. Your brand narrative, your strategic narrative is all based on this similar thing, and you can't have them be misaligned. That's where those things, I think, matter more. They're boxes that need to be checked for consumers over just this idea that like, those extra bells and whistles matter. It only matters if you make it matter with the stuff that you're saying.
It's so easy to fall in that trap to say, well, we have the best product, so obviously we're going to win. Right? We only need to talk about a product. So that's what, just talk about product. But we know this is not enough to win. Right? And you kind of almost wish that consumers were just smarter. So just read the label. It's going to be obvious and try it. So, yeah, I think the comparison to sports nutrition is a good one, even though I think probably less of an impact depending on the category, right? But not so many people see which brand of protein powder you're consuming, right? But you're carrying a can of energy drinks.
Yeah,
it's very visible. But I agree with everything you said. Right? I think for us, the product is, as I said, is a reason to believe. It's a foundation. It allows us to play in a certain space. It allows us to talk to a certain consumer, with credibility. Because if we were synthetic, made with a long list of artificial ingredients, there's a certain space where we just wouldn't be able to go. And that allows us to go in a space where our competitors are not going. But again, as part of the learnings, when you're expanding distribution really fast, you're growing really fast. You're bringing a lot of people. You're trying to expand faster. You're trying to go from more of a niche brand to a mainstream brand very rapidly. And you're trying things that try to appeal to the mainstream because you're in every single convenience store in the country. Right? And this is where I'd say the risk is you lose a little bit of that uniqueness and brand DNA because you're trying to please everybody and not pleasing anybody. Right? So I think that's also one of the learnings, to go back to, hey, who's the guru consumer? What type of message really resonates with them? And being super precise and focused on that. Right? And there's obviously, to go back to your question, there are product components to this. There is. It's not like we're going to stop talking about product. It's not like we have stopped talking about products. But you don't go in with organic first. You don't go in with plant-based first. You go in with many other things, right? And then organic and plant-based being supporting your whole narrative, right? Versus being at the forefront of it.
Yeah, because I always make the analogy of, if you're at a cocktail party and somebody that you're meeting that you've never met before, like what would you lead with? Would you lead with all these intricate little details about you, or do you go and talk about maybe something more broad and exciting and interesting? And then if you continue that conversation over time, those details start to validate all the stuff that you said at the beginning, like all that, like somebody's really saying, this guy is got his stuff together. This guy knows what he's talking about. Or, this is a great guy. Like at the end of the day, I think that's where the brand, you start talking about, some of this more broader strategic narrative of like, I think you guys mentioned, like you said, good energy. Now you're moving into this like idea of, it was like, saw in the good people, good for you, good lifestyle, and good impact. Like that is this big, alignment, strategic alignment of like, these are all the touch points, both internally, externally, that we're trying to communicate. And if you talk about that in a broad umbrella way at the beginning, that's what's most interesting. That's what people are going to be, interested in over time. And then over those check marks, they're going to look at it and go, oh, was the product match that? Does the, is the support of their purpose-driven aspects support that? Is the way they treat their people? Like, you start to go through all those lines, and the more that those people lean in and the more they become interested in all these elements and they feel like they're connected, that's where I think the people move from, oh, I like the product, to I'm a brand advocate. I'm somebody that's passionate. I want to go out and tell the world about this brand that they've never heard about. And that over time, going back to the brand building, I think is like, that's what momentum builds up long term, that ends up creating huge differences. But the snowball starts small, and eventually when it goes down the hill, it starts to get bigger and bigger and bigger. But the patience sometimes of, like, based on how steep that hill is, you have to really try to understand where that's at,
And we've seen that happen, right? We've seen that happen, obviously, in the Quebec province, where we are the most successful, where the brand is a real lifestyle brand, very iconic. So we've seen how that happened in the province of Quebec. To be fair, we thought it'd be easier to replicate that success outside of Quebec than it really is. It's taking more time. But we're seeing this happen as well with retailers in other pockets of North America, in California, and all this. We're seeing the same type of brand love, brand attachment that's replicating, right? Most of the time, it's not coming from, when we see that momentum, it's not coming from convenience stores that much, right? It starts outside the convenience stores, and then it goes. Same with in Quebec, right? Convenience was always a portion, but there's the Quebec province from a convenience store industry is a very different thing. There's a lot of independence and stuff, and they do play a role to appeal to a certain type of consumer, but we're seeing that happen, and that's why we're so optimistic. We're seeing also the momentum on Amazon, right, which is different, but there's momentum there. Consumers looking for different brands that have a very different positioning and different narrative, supported by a better product. Like, Amazon is a great example of where product is important. Right? If you look at most of the conversation around on Amazon, a lot of it is around product, right? So consumers go on Amazon to look for better products. I don't think they only buy for product. I think there is lifestyle and imagery component as well, but potentially a little bit less, because I think you're very focused on trying to find the best product out there, versus convenience stores where I'd say it's a lot more about imagery. There's no shopping and browsing. You just pick up the brand and you love, that your friends are going to say, oh, that's a cool brand, or it says the right thing about who you are.
I think that's a great thing about Amazon, though, because just the mechanisms of the platform, of the feedback loops, of kind of that social credit score, of the ratings, and like there's a whole aspect of like how that algorithm will help people discover products that are best suited for what they're hoping to get out of it by those non-branded search terms. I think it's such a great discovery tool, and it's it's an element of, I guess, the broader, both just, I think, brand strategy, but also just the retail sales strategy that like beverage brands need to consider about the importance of that. Is that ever going to be the one that makes you the biggest brand in the world? No, but it's like it's an important component, I think, of it all. Of like that, even when you're at a Walmart or something, and maybe you come across a brand you've never heard of, and you see it, and what do? You probably go on and do a quick search, and you go, oh, look, this one looks like it's pretty good, and you buy it. It's like, but Amazon didn't get credit for that sale, but they did get credit for the influence. And like, if you're not utilizing that, appropriately, you're not getting the benefit from it. And going back to the product, and if it's a great product and people love it, and you're getting good feedback on there, that has a multiplier effect across the board for a lot of other channels that typically don't have those feedback loops, that you're not able to do it, other than maybe you see a end cap with 1,000 units sitting there and you go, oh, it must be selling pretty well if there's 1,000 units sitting there. Like, you have to go back to like the archaic ways of like deciding
popularity imagery, which is for a lot of consumers. I mean, there's a lot of consumers that for them, the main criteria is to fit in, right? It's to say, I don't want to be someone that's drinking something different, right? So there's a huge portion of consumers that just want to drink what everybody else is drinking. They want to be mainstream. They want to fit in. What they don't want to be this outlier drinking at different energy drinks or wearing different brands. They're the average guy, right? And that's a huge portion of the energy drink space.
Before I let you go, I wanted to give you a little bit of a space to describe, I think, a little bit of like what you guys are seeing from the GURU customer. Like there's so many, you mentioned, if it's the Canadian market, if it's the US market, there's, $20+ billion worth of money that's out there. But that big pie is not necessarily what you're after. It's like you got to eat the elephant one bite at a time, and you have to decide like what's that customer, what, who and how are you resonating with those customers. Like, I know I mentioned kind of the framework, but like, what are some of the things that you're doing now that I think are reinforcing finding those customers and making sure they come to you? Because I think that that's really that's the game. It's like, you have to define who you are and who you aren't, and then communicate that through whatever touch points, if it's product, if it's marketing, to those customers that are gonna find you. Like, how are you guys like trying to accomplish that now, and how you guys have gotten better, I think, over the last couple of years at doing that?
Yes, I think I would say that we are now clearer than ever on that, because if I was super transparent in the past, a lot of this was being done on guts and instinct, right? And what we were seeing on social media and talking to consumers and stuff. But now there has not, that continues, because I think social media and consumer interaction plays a big role. But we now have done over the years extensive research that I mentioned on qualitative and quantitative to really understand who that consumer is, right? And then when we look at our brand and what we stand for and who we are and what's the resonance with certain segments, right? So we now have clear consumers that we know that they're better for you, clean, good energy product is not for everyone. There are consumers who couldn't care less. That's very, very clear. And that's why we're not wasting money on these. And we know that the mainstream consumer we just talked about as well is going to come, right? After, once you reach a certain level of legitimacy or mainstream aspect to it, because they won't consider brands that are not mainstream enough. But there are segments that resonate with. I can't disclose everything because this is where, we're a publicly traded company, which in that sense, we're very transparent in the financials, but this is the part that's more proprietary on who the GURU consumer is and who we're targeting. Like, I wouldn't want to disclose all our secrets to our competitors, but what I would say is that this is extremely important to understand who our brand and our story and our products really resonates with, and being laser focused on that. Right? And then going, obviously building a brand narrative, the right content to appeal to these people, but also going to the right retailers for this, right? There's a reason why we're in a leading position at Whole Foods since 2005, right? There's a reason why we're the leader in Erewhon, for example. There's a reason why we have momentum on Amazon. And there's a reason why we've had the success we've had in Quebec, right? But it's not about huge land grab. This is a brand for everyone. Let's list everywhere. Let's go to 300,000 doors and it's going to do well, right? There's going to be a time for this, but now it's about finding the right consumers with the right message and doing it right. I think this is, we could speak a lot more about that consumer, but I think it's intuitively, if you think about good energy, good impact, you're going to think about a consumer that's a little bit more white collar versus blue collar, consumer that's more educated. I'm giving you kind of the demographics, but there's a lot more into psychographics, right? And the values and the type of imagery that they're looking for. But you can think of other brands that are playing in that space, not in the energy drink space, because there's really no other brand in the energy drink space that's appealing to the consumer. But for example, in the apparel space, there is plenty of brands that are going after that consumer.
Well, I appreciate all the conversation. We went all over the board. We definitely covered it up, down, sideways. I feel like this was one of those conversations that I enjoy the best, because like we could shift gears and move all around. And so I enjoyed that you were able to keep up with me, and I was able to keep up with you, because that, I think, what makes the content good. Like, these are People always say these are the fly on the wall conversations that they wish they could have get access to. This is not the typical, me ask you a question, you answer it, I ask you another question, because I think that stuff is like, yeah, I don't know, that's not for me. So I appreciate, Carl, you being able to be open and excited to join me on this ride.
Thank you so much. It was great. Great time.
But I hope you enjoyed the first principles thinking that went into my latest YouTube video. If you did, can you do me a favor by hitting that like button? That quick and free action helps YouTube know my content is worth spreading to more people. Also, we're getting really close to reaching my next subscriber goal, and it would be great if you join me on this journey. But to do that, we need to fix the fact that slightly more than 3/4 of you that are watching this video right now are not subscribed to my YouTube channel, and that hurts my feelings. Regardless, I want to thank you for giving me some of your attention and time, and I'll see you on the next one.